In this lesson, we discuss the technique of dependency determination and integration. As we have seen in the previous lesson, activities are linked by dependencies, also called as links or relationships. To build a realistic schedule, it is critical that we understand the true nature of these dependencies. And we will do that in this lesson. Any dependency has 4 attributes, but 2 of them will be applicable at the same time, like this: mandatory external dependencies, mandatory internal dependencies, discretionary external dependencies, and the last one is discretionary internal dependencies. Let us understand what these core attributes are one by one. The first one is mandatory dependencies are those stipulated by contract or government regulations, or it is inherent in the work itself. For example, if you are building some sort of a software project, then that software has to run on some hardware processor. It is a mandatory dependency. If you are constructing a house, you have to build the foundation first. That is a mandatory dependency. If the laws require that a bridge has to be constructed in a certain way, then it has to be done so. These are all examples of mandatory dependencies. Mandatory dependencies are also commonly called as hard logic or hard constraints in some text. But an important point to note, especially if you are my earlier student from Microsoft Project, mandatory dependencies are not the same as scheduling constraints, such as date constraints that you find in tools such as Microsoft Project. Constraints as against dependencies allow you to put boundaries on the flexibility of scheduling algorithms. Okay, the second one is discretionary dependencies, which are in contrast also called as preferential logic or soft logic. These are dependencies that originate from domain knowledge. These are the dependencies that arise from best practices or expert knowledge of a certain field. Discretionary dependencies will recommend a particular sequence of work amongst many alternate acceptable sequences. For example, the so-called smoke testing is always done on new software builds before embarking on heavier testing. Another example from the construction industry recommends that plumbing work should be done before electrical work. But this is not mandatory. It's just a best practice. Sometimes both works may happen in parallel, or sometimes it may even get reversed. But following the best practices will reduce project risk, or it will reduce cost, or it will provide some other benefits. Discretionary dependencies should be thoroughly documented whenever you use it, because it may limit your scheduling flexibility. If your project gets into difficulties, then these dependencies can be modified. It is the responsibility of the project team expertise to determine which discretionary dependencies will be used in scheduling. Next, we move on to external dependencies, which are relationships between project activities and non-project activities. For our hospital EHR project, government clearance may be required for data protection and privacy policies. The project team might not have control over the dates because these are external dependencies. Another example is when you are expecting hardware vendors to release certain features to develop software upon. It is external to you. The project team should decide how they will work around these external dependencies. The last one is internal dependencies. They are the easiest to understand. They are the relationships amongst tasks which are within the control of the team. A simple example is when the EHR team cannot demo to the stakeholders until they set up a working prototype. One more very common example is when a resource is tied up with some other work and they can take on the next work only when they are freed up. This becomes an internal mandatory dependency. So these are the 4 attributes of dependencies. Any 2 of them will be applicable at a given time as listed here. This analysis will help you build a realistic schedule. Always make sure you document the decisions taken in your scheduling software. It should be a ready reference because 1 year later you might forget why certain decisions were taken. Realistic schedules will not necessarily be the most efficient, but they will offer something else, such as it may reduce risks or it may improve quality and so on. In the next lesson, we will look at one more related scheduling technique called as leads and lags. So, I will see you there.